My name is Alexander Reid. I'm 41 years old. To the world, I'm the man who made his first million before he could legally rent a car. Forbes called me a visionary, Fortune listed me in their 40 under 40, and tech blogs called me the golden mind of the digital age. But none of that ever mattered as much as people think. Because behind the tailored suits and billion-dollar deals, I was just a man who came home to silence. Every night. For years. My wife, Grace, was my entire world. We met before the money, before the suits, before the offices with glass walls and rooftop views. She believed in me when I was working from a couch with a broken leg and a second-hand laptop. I still remember her bringing me coffee in mismatched mugs and listening to my wildest ideas like they were prophecies. We married young, built everything together. But there was one thing we couldn't build, no matter how hard we tried. A family. We tried to have a child for nearly 8 years. I don't think people understand what infertility does to a couple until they're in it. It's not just heartbreak, it's a slow erosion of hope. Every cycle starts with excitement. Every month ends in grief. And you pretend you're okay, because you're supposed to be strong, because people say, at least you have each other. We went through rounds of IVF. I lost count of the medications, the blood draws, the waiting rooms filled with other couples who also wore those forced hopeful smiles. One day Grace looked at me in the middle of yet another consultation and asked, "What if this is our forever? Just us?" I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't love her, God. I loved her more than anything. But because deep down, I wanted more than just success and stability. I wanted the sound of tiny feet running down the hall. I wanted to be someone's hero who didn't care about my stock price. And then tragedy. She went in for what was supposed to be a minor outpatient procedure. Nothing serious. I kissed her forehead before they wheeled her in, told her I'd take her to her favorite restaurant after. But she never came out. A sudden clot. No warning. No time. They told me she didn't suffer. But they didn't know me. They didn't know I would suffer every single day after. For the next 2 years, I completely disappeared from public life. My assistant handled meetings. My lawyers took over contracts. I stayed home, in the house Grace and I built, surrounded by everything and everyone we used to love. I couldn't walk past the nursery. It was the room we painted together, arguing over pastel shades and stenciled clouds. The crib we ordered still sat unopened in the corner. I once caught myself rocking back and forth in the middle of that room with an empty blanket in my arms. That's what grief does. It bends reality. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. He had Grace's photo tucked behind the mirror. Same toothbrush. Same cologne. Same routine. But no soul left in his eyes. And that morning, something inside me whispered, "This isn't the end of your story." That was the day I walked out of the house for the first time in weeks. I didn't call anyone. I didn't plan it. I just drove until I found myself parked in front of the Riverview Adoption Center, a place I had once passed 1,000 times without really seeing. I walked in. The woman at the front desk looked up like I was in the wrong building. She adjusted her glasses and said, "Can I help you?" "I think so," I replied. "I want to adopt a child." She blinked a few times. "You're here to donate? Or host a fundraiser?" "No," I said gently. "I'm here because I want to be a father." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, slowly, she stood up and led me into a room with soft lighting, toys in the corner, and the scent of lavender and paper. That's where it all began. Background checks. Home studies. Endless questions. But for the first time in years, I didn't mind being asked things like, "Why now?" Or, "Are you emotionally ready?" I was finally choosing to stop grieving and start living again. And then, after weeks of interviews, paperwork, and waiting, I saw him. A little boy. No more than 3. Quiet, with wide eyes that carried more fear than wonder. He clutched a worn-out elephant plush like it was the only thing in the world he trusted. He looked at me like he didn't believe I was real. And for a moment, I didn't either. That boy didn't know it yet. But I was about to change both of our lives. They called him Noah at the center, but the truth was he had no birth certificate. No official papers. No recorded birthday. Just a name stitched into the collar of his shirt. And even that, I later learned, had been written by a nurse who had to call him something. He was just there. Abandoned. Forgotten by the system. They found him on the steps of a rural church one cold October morning, wrapped in a tattered blue blanket, his tiny hands blue from the cold. No note. No explanation. Just a child with haunted eyes and a scar above his left eyebrow, like a silent reminder that life had been rough before it even really began. When the social worker first placed him in front of me, I remember thinking, he doesn't look afraid. He looks empty. He stared at me with eyes far too serious for someone that small. No crying. No clinging. Just a silent study, like he was trying to decide if I was worth trusting, or just another face that would eventually disappear. I knelt at his level. "Hi, buddy," I said, my voice cracking a little. "My name's Alexander." He didn't say anything, just hugged that worn elephant tighter. A soft whisper came from the social worker behind me. "He doesn't talk much." She didn't mean it literally. She meant it all. Noah had been through multiple foster homes, and every one of them had reported the same thing: withdrawn, detached, unresponsive, as if he had built walls too high for anyone to climb. I didn't try to force a connection that day. I didn't ask him questions. I just sat on the floor next to him and let him draw with broken crayons while I quietly sipped juice from a paper cup beside him. He slid a picture toward me before we left. A stick figure with spiky hair and a small child holding hands. "I like it," I said softly. "Is that us?" He didn't speak, but he didn't take it back either. That night, I went home and stared at the photo for almost an hour. 2 weeks later, the papers were signed. The background checks were clear, and Noah was in the back seat of my black SUV, holding his elephant like a lifeline while the city passed by outside. I had hired a child psychologist to help me through the process. I wasn't naive. Money didn't solve trauma. Love didn't erase fear overnight. I needed to be patient, gentle, consistent, and above all safe. The first few days in the house were quiet. Noah barely explored. He didn't ask about the toys. He didn't smile when I played music. He simply stood by windows and looked out, like he was always waiting for someone to come take him away again. But I made him breakfast every morning, sat next to him during cartoons, read aloud at night, even though he never reacted. Until one evening, 5 days in, I found him standing outside my bedroom door holding the elephant, eyes wide. "You okay, Noah?" He hesitated. Then, barely a whisper, "Can I stay?" My heart nearly stopped. That was the first time I heard his voice. I lifted him gently into my bed, and he curled up beside me without a word. He slept peacefully for the first time since he arrived. The next morning, I woke up to an unexpected sensation: weightlessness. I was on the floor, collapsed. The last thing I remembered was standing in the kitchen, about to make breakfast, and then everything went black. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. Doctors swarmed me. Tests were run. Scans. Blood work. At first, I assumed it was exhaustion, maybe dehydration, maybe too much stress piled on after everything I'd been through. But then the doctor sat down beside me and said 6 words I never expected to hear again. "Mr. Reid, we believe you were poisoned." The room tilted when I heard the word. Poisoned? It didn't make sense. Who would poison me? Why? I wasn't some crooked businessman with enemies. I wasn't running from debt collectors or hiding secrets. My life had been quiet, especially in the years after Grace passed. And since Noah came home, I'd barely left the house except for groceries and therapy sessions. I sat upright in the hospital bed, heart pounding, my mind racing. "What kind of poison?" I asked. The doctor, a soft-spoken man in his 50s, adjusted his glasses. "We're still running full talk screens, but it appears to be slow-acting, possibly slipped into food or drink over several days. Symptoms match low-level organophosphates. Agricultural in origin. Pesticide. But I ate organic. My chef was meticulous." Wait, my chef? Except I hadn't had him come by in over a week. Ever since Noah arrived, I'd been cooking myself. For both of us. A nurse came in to check my vitals. Her badge said, "Carla." I remember it clearly because she paused, gave me a small smile, and said, "There's a visitor. A little boy with an elephant. He hasn't let go of it once." My throat tightened. Noah. When he walked in, he didn't run. He didn't cry. He simply shuffled to my bedside and held up a folded piece of paper. I opened it with trembling hands. Another drawing. But this time, it wasn't stick figures. It was our kitchen. 2 figures. One, clearly me, was lying on the floor. The other, smaller, rounder, stood nearby holding something in their hand. And behind them, a third shape, with red scribbled eyes, hiding in a doorway. I looked at Noah. He stared back, his face blank, unreadable. "Who's this?" I asked, pointing to the figure in the doorway. He opened his mouth. Slowly. And then he whispered one word that chilled my blood. "Mommy." I froze. He'd never mentioned her. The center had no record. No one knew who had left him. But now, this little boy was drawing her. watching her, remembering her, and somehow she was still close. I gave the drawing to the nurse. She passed it to security. Within hours, they had footage pulled from my home's external cameras, footage I had honestly forgotten even existed. And there she was, a woman, face obscured by a hoodie, slipping into the backyard late at night. Twice. She moved like she knew the layout, like she knew where to avoid the sensors. The second time, she carried a bottle. And the next morning was when I collapsed. Security teams were called in. Police got involved. But the deeper shock was this. Noah didn't just remember her. He had seen her. She had been watching, waiting, and based on the toxins found in my blood, trying to make sure he would need her again, to remove me from the picture. But why? Why would a mother abandon her child at a church, then come back years later just to poison the man who tried to give him a new life? The answer came 3 days later. A knock at the hospital room door. And a woman in handcuffs, her hair matted, eyes burning like wildfire, looked at me and hissed through clenched teeth. He's not yours. He was never yours to keep. She stood in the doorway like a ghost that refused to stay buried. Handcuffed, gaunt, hair wild, skin pale like moonlight. But it wasn't her appearance that shook me, it was the fury simmering in her eyes. Not guilt, not sadness, just raw hatred. The officers flanked her on either side, firm but cautious. The detective, a no-nonsense woman named Harrow, warned me, you don't have to speak to her. We have what we need. But I needed answers. I looked her dead in the eye. You tried to kill me. Her lips curled. I tried to protect what's mine. A cold silence settled between us. Who are you? I asked. I'm Noah's mother, she snapped. And you rich savior types think you can buy children like property. You thought you could just sweep in and erase me. No one erased you, I said, trying to stay calm. You disappeared. You abandoned him. I left him somewhere safe, she hissed. I didn't abandon him. I was being hunted. I was trying to protect him. Hunted by who? But she didn't answer. Her eyes darted to the officer beside her, then back to me. Do you even know who he is? She said, almost with pity now. What's in his blood? The words hung in the air like fog. I felt my breath catch. What are you talking about? She smiled, broken and bitter. He's not just some lost child. He was born to people who were supposed to disappear. I was a surrogate. Paid. Controlled. Then discarded. I blinked. A surrogate? Her voice trembled now, not from fear, but rage. They said I'd never see him again. That he was going to some political family. Off the books. Hidden. But I ran. I ran with him. I hid him. I gave him a new name. And then you left him. I had no choice, she screamed. They found me. I thought if I left him at that church, maybe someone would take him, and he'd be invisible again. Not on the grid. Not traceable. She laughed bitterly. And then I see you parading around with him, rich and proud, splashed across a foundation's press release like he's some rescue puppy. You put a spotlight on him. You brought them back. I was stunned. This wasn't just a case of a lost child and a grieving father. This was bigger, deeper. There were people, dangerous ones, who still believed Noah was their property. I didn't know, I said quietly. All I saw was a child who needed a home. She narrowed her eyes. And that's why I couldn't let you live. Before the guards could move, she lunged, just a twitch, but enough to make everyone react. She was pulled back, restrained, and dragged out of the room still screaming. You're not his father. You never will be. And just like that, she was gone. But her words didn't leave. That night, I sat by Noah's bed as he slept. He had no idea what had happened. No idea what his past held. No idea what kind of chaos had nearly swallowed both our lives. He was just a child. My child. No matter what blood ran through his veins. No matter who had tried to destroy that bond. I was never going to let anyone take him away again. In the days following her arrest, everything changed. I thought the worst was over, that she'd be processed, tried, and forgotten. But I underestimated just how deep this rabbit hole went. What she had whispered in that hospital room wasn't just madness. It was real. Noah wasn't just abandoned. He had been hidden. The adoption agency was forced to open internal investigations. My lawyers got involved. Government officials started knocking on my door, not with congratulations, but subpoenas. They wanted to know how I had legally adopted a child with no traceable birth record, no biological parents on file, and no digital identity prior to his time at the orphanage. One investigator said bluntly, "You didn't adopt a child, Mr. Reid. You adopted a question mark." I didn't care. They wanted to take him back, for his protection, they said. until we determine where he legally belongs. Noah clung to me that night when they tried to escort him to a temporary guardian facility. His fingers were dug into my shirt, his body trembling like he was falling through the world again. The memory of him screaming, begging not to go, will haunt me forever. So I fought. With every dollar I had. With every contact, every favor, every ounce of influence I'd earned through decades of building empires. I wasn't going to let them turn this child's life into another bureaucratic disaster. He had already been abandoned once. He wasn't going to be orphaned again by red tape. The battle went on for weeks. My private investigators uncovered sealed documents linking his surrogate mother to a defunct but highly suspicious program, one that paired impoverished women with underground political donors looking to privately expand bloodlines. Eugenics disguised as adoption. Ownership masked as compassion. It was sickening. Noah wasn't the first, but he might be the only one who escaped. And now, someone wanted him back, or wanted him gone. But I wasn't afraid. I was furious. Because this child didn't need a secret past. He needed a safe future. Eventually, the pressure we applied forced the courts to acknowledge the reality. The woman who gave birth to Noah had legally forfeited all rights. The people who once paid her were gone, disappeared, or dead. There was no one left to claim him. Except me. The final verdict came in a quiet courtroom. Noah sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, wearing a tiny suit and looking both brave and terrified. The judge looked over her glasses and said, "Mr. Reid, in the eyes of this court, you are now and forever the legal parent and sole guardian of this child." I looked at Noah. He didn't fully understand what those words meant. But when I lifted him into my arms, he whispered, "Home?" And I said, "Yes, son. Home." It's been 2 years since that day. Noah laughs now. He runs, sings, paints. He builds Lego towers taller than he is and asks impossible questions about dinosaurs and the stars. He's gone from a silent, broken boy to a vibrant, fearless light in my life. Every night before bed, we read a book together. He always chooses the same one, The Little Prince. Somewhere near the end, he always interrupts to ask, "Do you think I'm still lost?" And I always answer the same way. "No, buddy. You were never lost. You were just on your way to me."